You are listening to Shameless Stories. This is Nicola Humber, founder of the Unbound Press, publishing imprint for magical unbound women and proud sponsor of this podcast.
So, for those of you who aren't aware, I am turning Shameless Stories into a book. It's going to be a beautiful compendium of shame stories, but from a place of power. It's going to be a bit similar to this book. Wake up, mother. You can still buy this, by the way. It's a bit like a sandwich, so we'll talk a lot about the origins of shame, where it came from, what it means to be shameless, and then we will be including a series of stories from amazing authors around shame and the connections to various emotions. And at the back of the book, because I love a sandwich, we will provide some guidance, some insights, and some journaling exercises to help move people through shame. Basically, the whole goal is to help people celebrate living shamelessly. And if you would like to be involved, I am taking applications for inclusion right now.
Welcome to another episode of Shameless Stories, the podcast that aims to lift the lid and bring shame into a conversation to then enable us to step into our full power. Because where shame is shared, it dies. And that was a really bad analogy. It's taken from Brené Brown, but I love it. I love it so much. And I'm really excited to introduce to you a soul sister that I have been journeying with for quite some time. We were just figuring it out before we came on camera. Lovely to meet the magical Nicole. And I'm going to let her introduce herself because, well, yeah, things have, I feel the expansion already as we're talking. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I've been so looking forward to this, just to see you as well. But just shame is so important to the conversation. I love what you're creating with the podcast. But yeah, let me introduce myself. I noticed as I'm thinking, oh, what if I get this wrong? So that's central to my journey. Is this sense of yeah, exactly. It's central to my journey. Is this idea of I kind of lived life essentially with the idea that I was going to get stuff wrong. And so I needed to live up to society's expectations, which led me down this kind of very mundane path of becoming a brand manager, getting into a relationship with someone who was acceptable and going to keep me safe, and kind of living this very kind of mundane life that actually just wasn't really me. Now I would say, I'm a witch, so far different. The witch is often oh God, that's really scary. And so there's been a huge journey of alchemy from that place of living in the mundane into fully embracing and owning my magic and becoming a healer, which was ultimately who I was born to be. I see that as I kind of peel back the layers of shame that I've journeyed with to be able to arrive at seeing that. And yeah, it's just been such an alchemical journey. And shame really has been healing shame has been kind of central to that.
Yeah. So we were just talking about, I do this every time we have the best stuff comes up for discussion around this topic, because it is such everybody feels it in some way, shape or form. And like you were saying, it's the thing that some of the guests that have come on, I've asked the question and it's often not good enough. It's not worthy enough. It don't fit in. And we do all these things to try and fit in, to the detriment of our own peace and mind, I guess, our own kind of, and that's society, right? We're kind of taught to, this is what good looks like. This is the path we must follow. And if you deviate from it, then you might get eaten by the wolf. You know what I mean? It's that kind of, that story that we're a bit told as children, that this is how life should be.
Yeah, absolutely. And what just came as you were saying about the wolf, and wolf to me is ironically the remedy of learning to reclaim our wild and our wild expression. But also my own journey was very much around learning in the first place how to kind of become the witch. And the witch is again that kind of mirror for us of how being our full true expression will get us burned at the stake. Like there's the whole witch wound piece that has us, like, it's kind of ingrained in ourselves, that has us shame and shut down who we are. So I'm probably jumping ahead now, but just what came as she was speaking.
No, I love it, because again, like witch, just like pulling on that title witch, like, wow, I mean, that feeling in your body of, well, we you know, the stories that we're told are the witch is the woman to be feared, you know, is old and wrinkly and past her time and like casting spells on people. And I just think it's fantastic that you're reframing that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so interesting you mentioned the word kind of like shame dies, because I was like, yes, shame dies so that we can be rebirthed as who we are. So yeah, so important.
I'd love it if you could share a little bit about, because you mentioned people as medicine, like,
Yes.
love it if you could dive a little bit into that, what you do, how you help people like move through shame.
Well, do you know what? I was thinking about shame before, because I know you said we talk about what is shame. And I was thinking about it because my worldview on shame is probably quite radical in some ways, because I fundamentally believe I'm a healer. You know, the witch is a healer, she's a creatrix. And so I've worked hard to reclaim those aspects of myself. But, you know, I've been a healer for decades and been healing myself for a lifetime. So what I believe about shame is that it's essentially what creates disease. And so that is quite a radical thing to say, but ultimately I'm going to explore like my worldview on it, because it's probably different to kind of how the mainstream world views health. But essentially, like, shame is this fundamental sense of wrongness that creates like a separation from who we really are, like a suppression of all the different parts of ourselves that make up who we are. And so in that way, I often just describe it as like a separation from our soul. And that's a trauma. And we don't think that because, like you say, we've kind of been conditioned into like that being the right way. Having kind of studied the art and science of healing and the universal laws and principles of magic and ancient healing wisdom, like one of the things, the principles that stood out to me is that of homeopathy, which is kind of like one of my lineages. And that ultimately, the principles of that is that suppression of who we are is what leads us to ill health and disease. And that, when I look back over my own journey, like over the time, I see how true that was, because shame just had me suppress all these different aspects of myself. I know you asked me about people as remedies. I'm kind of getting there, but I might just pause and see see whether there's anything you want to ask there.
No, I love that, because I think it is a radical mindset or a radical perspective based on the mainstream, but I do fully believe that there are people that will be listening that will be nodding their head in agreement with you. I do believe that it's like labels, it's I mean, actually, just talking into my own personal story, I think if I'd have continued in the way that I was in my corporate world, in the effectively the box that I'd placed myself in, I mean, at that point I had vertigo, I had back pain, I could see black energy on the ground because I'd been attuned, so I could see, I mean, and I still wasn't paying attention to the signs, right? Because humans are bloody minded and they think that that's what they should do. Actually, the universe made the decision for me, and I ended up I feel like I'm in my best, touch wood, I'm in the best kind of health and wellness I've ever been. You know, I feel strong, I feel, you know, relatively happy. I mean, obviously everyday niggles, we live in this world, right? But ultimately I'm happy and healthy. What more can you ask?
That's so gorgeous. And it does really feel like it's kind of unpacking those layers of shame that leads us back to health. And one of my favorite quotes ever by one of the homeopaths, James Tyler Kent, he said, "There's no cell or tissue so small that it does not keep its soul and life force in it." Which ultimately to me means when we suppress our souls, which shame does, like, or our truth, you know, disease manifests in our cells, and we also drain our life force. Like, it's exhausting to operate from shame and wounding and all of the pieces that have kind of kept us trying to fit in. Like, that's an exhausting place to be. And like, I really resonate with what you just shared around your own journey, because my journey and kind of what initiated me, I guess, into the witch in the first place was that kind of journey of burnout. And that was from a very young age. Actually, I was only 10, and because I had a lot of wounding and a lot of shame around being different and being who I was, that kind of like immediately at a very young age kind of triggered this kind of burnout, because I was just trying to be who I wasn't.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to pull on that thread a little bit more. Like, and what did that look like for a 10-year-old? I mean, that's me.
Yeah, well, essentially, like when I burned out, I actually couldn't walk, so I missed a whole year of school. And what's interesting when I look back, because I always used to think, oh, what a shame, like poor me, like I was so different and I lost out on that thing. And I actually had an insight one day. I was like, hang on a minute, in that year, my mum took me to all the witchy healers and like started this almost initiation into what later became the work that I do now as a healer. Like I went to homeopaths and Reiki healers and, all sorts of like weird and wonderful magical things. So when I look back, I was like, oh, hang on, that was just perfect, actually. Like that was how it was meant to be, because that was the start of me starting to understand like how to heal myself as well. Because I think what can also happen when we go into shame is that we start to like try and fix it. And I often describe that as like a quick fix. We'll go to the doctors and get drugs, or we'll just kind of mask it in some way, or we'll drink alcohol, or whatever, watch too much TV or scroll on social media, rather than directly looking at the deeper thing, which is like some place we're feeling shame, and that's kind of like stopped us from being who we are, and that's taking so much energy.
Yeah, that's like just like honoring that gift that how lovely that your mum considered alternative routes anyway.
Yeah.
Because, that's the thing. It's like in the old days, it would go to the doctors. And I remember my own mum saying, oh, the doctor just tells you it's, take paracetamol, or, it's women's problems, we can't help you. It's kind of, there was a real kind of rough, you were kind of almost like made to feel insignificant in your explaining.
You're wrong again.
Exactly. It's like, what's your problem? Get on with it, kind of thing. I don't have what I find fascinating is if that person had said, I don't know the answer to that, let me go and check it out for you. But that's too difficult, because it opens up a can of worms. And thank God it's not like that anymore. However, I love the fact your mum took your 10-year-old self to those places. That's just amazing, because the work you do now. So let's dive into a little bit more about that work. By the way, I love this title, Apothecary Witch, Doctrix of Ancient. Tell me what you do.
So, yes, predominantly, I mean, I help people. I was really realizing this as I was contemplating like shame. I was like, really, I help people heal shame, like heal the layers of shame. Because what I see now is that any place where we've had like an incidence of shame, it's had us in suppression, but it is kind of like a wound. And so the way that I would define that is like we almost go into what I call a remedy state. So I believe that we all have the capacity to heal ourselves. And so it's essentially, that's what I'm helping women do, is learn how to heal themselves with what I call their own inner apothecary of remedies. Because things are mirrors, and so this is kind of coming to the people as mirrors, but essentially anything in the world is a mirror. And we were talking about mirrors earlier. But what those mirrors do is they show us where we have shamed ourselves and give us a new choice. Like they allow us to stop shaming ourselves. And so, there's ultimately, like what cracked me open to that was because of course, even though when I was 10, I had like been in this initiation into the witch, I was then like, well, the witch isn't acceptable. Let's shove her down. Let's just keep kind of plowing through the normal way of like going to the doctor, until I burned out again at 25 or 23, I think I was. And that's when I really started to be like, oh, hang on, I'm going to try what I tried at 10. And like, if that helps me again, I'm going to devote my life to it. And so not realizing quite the implications of that would lead me to kind of healing my own wounds and becoming a healer for others, I kind of set out on this journey of like starting to learn homeopathy. And that's what kind of helped me to see this piece around like remedies, like everything's a remedy. And so yeah, I then journeyed into kind of like archetypal work and energy healing, and then started to see, actually, not kind of intentionally developed, but started to see that the way I was working with homeopathy was slightly different, in that homeopathy works with remedies. People will take a remedy, a bit like going to the doctor taking a prescription. But I
Yeah.
started to see that as I brought these remedies alive, because they all have personality profiles, I've kind of brought them alive as archetypes and was starting to channel them and work with them in a slightly different way. So and they ended up combining these three modalities, these three ancient wisdom bodies, into a new way of working with them. And started to see that, like, actually anything can be a remedy. And there's over 4,000 remedies in homeopathy. So literally most things are distilled, and also have like a physical map of what that can actually heal. So whilst we might take, so say for example, like aurum, which is gold, we might want to work with that to reclaim our power, like gold being a symbol of our power, of where we can kind of claim that back. There's also a lot of physical symptoms in that, where, so like there might be menstrual symptoms that aurum helps us solve. So I'm going to pause there again, because I've just kind of done a very brief overview. The work I do.
I'm loving this. You don't need to keep pausing. Honestly, the flow of information and wisdom for the listeners is amazing, because, you know, as you're talking, I'm thinking, oh yeah, someone told me I needed to work with apple wisdom, and I'm like, oh, I wonder what that means, and I might speak to Nicole about that in a minute.
Yeah, please do.
I think it's just such a, it's not, I guess, I mean, I wouldn't call it radical, but I know that people listening might. That
Yes.
it, like, yes, there's homeopathy. Yes, you can go and get yourself a flower remedy from Boots, and you know, rescue remedy. That was what I was always given before walks, and to kind of chill me out. And you know, there's a few kind of tried and tested, well-known remedies out there, but you're talking everything and anything being a source.
Yeah, and one of the fundamental principles, I guess, of the work that I do is that like cures like. So how that applies to shame, I guess, is that what's kind of caused something will also heal it. So it's the kind of being able to allow the remedy to show us like where we've maybe shamed. So for example, aurum, let's stick with that one. Like we often shame our power, especially for those of us who are maybe secret witches and have this amazing creative power, but also have been deeply sensitive, and most of our lives have kind of shamed, like, oh, well, what if I'm, you know, if we've got big emotions and that creates for us, like we've been shamed, our power has been shamed. And so, like, we start to see how that is, you know, when we look there and see that, or okay, aurum shows up in shadow in this kind of power wounding, in this kind of mistrust of what she's able to create. Maybe she's either feeling helpless, or maybe she's just swinging the opposite way into the aurum shadow of like being a tyrant, because that's also very much been my journey, is like flip-flopping between, oh, I can't do this is too much, and then being like, you're going to do this, like you will do this now, like beating myself up with a BT stick. And so, like, as we start to just like even take that lens, we start to see, oh, like I shamed myself for being helpless, I shamed myself for being a tyrant. And the more that we can kind of welcome and love those parts back, the more we're healing that wounding and able to express the gold of the remedy, which in aurum's case is very much about like creating from feminine soft power, like not beating ourselves up, being loving in what we're creating, and allowing our power to be fully expressed. And maybe one of the symptoms of aurum is that we've had like feminine pain or even menstrual cycle problems, and as we kind of heal that kind of mental emotional aspect where we've shamed and suppressed ourselves, those symptoms will clear up.
Yeah, I mean, wow. Like, and as you say, like the shame is at each end of the spectrum. It's like kind of bringing it back into the middle line, isn't it? Trying to bring a balance about, yes, you can be on it, and yes, you can be flip-floppy feminine. Like, you know, finding a lovely middle ground is where the balance lies. And that's I think that for me, that I've understand on my own healing journey, is trying to find that balance, and it shifts all the time.
And even often, as I describe it, like the third way. And I kind of guess what I mean by the third way is like, it doesn't have to be either of those or even a balance of those. It's like what's true for us.
Yeah.
like coming back to like healing the shame, like what's actually a true expression for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've done a lot of work around healing your own shame, but do you have any kind of anecdotes that you can share with us where you've alchemized the shame into power, alchemized that shame into a positive experience?
Yeah, there's so many. I'm just trying to think which one to go with, because you reminded me earlier of like my own birth story with giving birth to my daughter. I think that's a really powerful example actually of Aurum as well. So maybe I can talk a bit to that, because yeah, I very much was in the shadow of Aurum when I gave birth. You know, I was initiated by the witch in that I was like exploring all these things, but I hadn't quite got the conscious awareness of this modality and how it worked. So I very much was in I mean, to a degree there's like she-wolf as well, because I was kind of flipping between like, I can't do this, I can't give birth, and in, you know, in the middle of COVID, as we were talking about earlier, to and into like being the rebel and just fighting everybody, which is kind of like a mixture of, it's like Aurum and she-wolf working together in some ways. And I so deeply shamed myself for, I remember basically I'd also got a paralyzed face at the time. And so my eye was taped shut, and they were trying to get rid of my partner, my husband, out of the room. And be like, he's got to go now. And I'd just given birth, literally just given birth. And I was like, he is not leaving. Like, there is absolutely not a chance on this earth this man is leaving after I've just given birth to a child, and like I have no idea what I'm doing. And I was like screaming, raging, and I was like, if you send him home, I'm going to, like, all of this stuff, because, you know, and I look back now and I think actually that was, yeah, good for me. Like I was expressing like my truth. And I remember them saying to me, we're going to get you analysed for being postnatal for postnatal psychosis. And I remember laughing in her face, being like, okay, you crack on. Like, I've just given birth, you're trying to take my husband away, and I've got an eye that's taped shut, but you crack on and assess me for that. And it was just like, that actually was probably more alchemy of she-wolf and expressing my wild than it was of Aurum, because Aurum kind of has that kind of vulnerability and softness to her that definitely was not being expressed in that moment. But it was like I spent my whole lifetime being a good girl. And so for me to be able to, even though there was a kind of shadowy element of that still, and like me snapping and snarling like the she-wolf, which actually is also she-wolf shadow, like I often describe she-wolf's alchemy as like wildness from love. So there was still like a shadowy expression, but I had managed to alchemize, like swinging into the opposite end of something that I wouldn't have normally expressed. And so I think that's probably quite a good example of like how in practice I journeyed that. I don't know if that was what you were after, but
No, that's, I mean, honestly, I just want to again like explore that a tiny bit more, because the power of, you know, creating as a woman, effectively birthing a child, it is such a primal act.
yes.
It is the ultimate act of creation, isn't it? So why the hell wouldn't you go nuts for them telling you to like remove your husband? And I know that a lot of that happened at the time. There was a lot of shame around doing things like giving birth at that time, because, you know, it was, you know, we were all in fear, which didn't help at all. And it wouldn't have helped any of the women that were in that situation, because there was this extra layer of fear coated on top of what you were already going through. And one thing that I have explored around my own birth story is the amount of fear that was like layered on to giving birth, the most natural thing in the world. And I've spoken to some amazing women on this podcast about more conscious birth, more empowered birth in their, you know, who are in their power. And, you know, there's a huge part of me that feels, I wish I'd known. I wish I'd known that it was okay and it was acceptable to go fucking nuts at the doctor.
Yeah, exactly. And although I'm still saying, you know, a wildness from love is the alchemy of she-wolf, like, yes, and we're always going to be in wounding. Like, there's no shame in our wounding. I think that's also really important, because I think what can happen as we start to explore these remedies and start to explore aspects of ourselves is we still shame those parts. And it's like, actually, we're just wanting to love and welcome those parts of ourselves home. Like, that's what's going to help us heal and reclaim these suppressed parts.
Yeah. And the more we work with them, the easier they are to move through. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like when you acknowledge it and then you let it move through, or you acknowledge it and you lean into it, it does heal so much quicker. I think where we're taught to resist, that is where, again, that's another learned response, isn't it? We're taught to kind of stiff upper lip it, resist, and pretend like it's not happening.
Yes, and particularly for me, that was kind of crucial to my own kind of wounding and my own shame, because I think when I'm autistic as well, and that's something I only really discovered by working with the witch, because I think a lot of witches are autistic or neurodivergent in some way. But like my whole life, I'd shamed being sensitive or different or, you know, wild in my expression of my emotions, or, you know, or also too quiet or, you know, too much essentially. So yeah, it's so important.
So important. And like I it's so fascinating, because the last few podcasts, the women that I've interviewed have all got autism, which I find, I love the fact that this is flowing like really naturally, and that, oh yeah, there's a few that all have a similar story, but it's I guess it's also like, you know, talking into people that have connections to, you know, aliens or whatever, whatever you want, however you want to call it. Effectively, there's this feeling of not fitting in,
Yeah.
and that shame starts very, very early.
Yeah, and that's the mirror that the witch offers to us, as we said, you know, going back to the witch wound, you know, that was what started to help me see, like, actually, this is just me expressing the witch and shaming myself for it. Like, and the more I've been able to kind of, again, I often describe it as like the witch is almost like the gatekeeper to our archetypal apothecary. So when I talk about the witch, I'm talking about her not necessarily just as a practicing witch, but as a lens or a mirror for a woman who knows her power, is her authentic self, and claims her magic. And so, like, we can all be witches, and we can all kind of work with, I almost like envisage it like she knows how to work with this apothecary and like take the remedy off the shelf and work with it as a mirror. And that's the kind of the way that she knows how to heal herself. I just wanted to come actually back to the people of remedies, because the other, just to address it, because I know you asked about it earlier, because we talked about remedies in general, but what I see is that as well as remedies kind of being out there, everybody also has, I kind of see everybody has their own kind of soul map of remedies that they're here to work with for their healing. And so one of the layers of the soul map is our soul, what I call our soul remedy. And so when we're talking about, like, a lot of healers will come into the work and be like, okay, I'm a witch, but I have no idea what I'm here to serve. Like, what's my medicine? What is it that I'm supposed to be focusing on? And I always say, like, our gifts are found in our wounds. And so there's often one remedy that is like our deepest core wound, that is the remedy that our soul was born here to express. So that, as we kind of express that into the world, we then become a mirror. So I think we talked about this before, because we were saying how, like, your podcast is almost like this beautiful apothecary of everybody expressing a different remedy. And that's how I see my own podcast as well. And that's actually how I intentionally create my podcast. But in essence, when we're able to heal for ourselves what our core wound is and express that into the world, that is such medicine for somebody else who will resonate with that. And it comes back to that principle of like yours, like Amelia Similibus, which is how the remedies work. It's like we are remedies for those similar to us, for those like us. And we're going to almost like hold up that mirror for people who've had a similar experience, so that they can look in that and go, oh, actually, that isn't as shameful as I thought.
It gives you the permission to really are, doesn't it? It's like we get closer to that level of integrity that I guess we're all searching for, effectively. If you're on the path of awakening spirituality, being more conscious in your decisions, it is about becoming more closely aligned to who you were here to, who you are supposed to be.
Exactly.
Yeah, I just get these visualizations of people removing like layers of clothing almost.
Yeah. And it's why the work of reclaiming the witch is so vital for healers, especially because, you know, we often will hide that very core wound because it's the one we shame most. And so for us to be able to truly like be magnetic in our expression, and for people to know that we're for them, Like, we need to be able to share our voice about the stories that we feel are shameful as we've healed and alchemized them. And often that's the thing we least want to do as secret witches, who want to hide those parts of ourselves.
Yes, for fear of being burnt at the stake, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I have described so a few years back, I did some work in the media and basically told everybody, well, went to the Daily Mail and said that I had a secret. The feature was all about us all having secrets, the women that were interviewed. And my secret was that I spoke to angels and believed in something bigger than myself. I married my husband without him knowing about it, kind of thing. There was a real feeling. It was so interesting because I don't think I would have been able to do that piece without leaning into. So I'd met a group of amazing women at a Glastonbury retreat, and I was messaging them going, should I be doing this? Should I be saying this? Like, what, who am I to say this? And I remember they were like, just, call on the Magdalene energy. You're here to blaze the trail for us. So go and enjoy it and all of this. And there was a beautiful photo shoot and I appeared in the double page spread in the Daily Mail that 2 weeks later. And I nearly died. I was like, I'm not kidding. I was like, I walked. It was around, I think it was around COVID as well, because I remember because a lot of the work was online then. Yeah. And I remember walking down into the school playground thinking, oh my God, I'm going to get stoned. I'm just going to, for even daring to say something out loud about this. And all I got was this positive, can you help me? Please, I do this too. I do that. Me too. I talk to the trees. I hug the trees. Oh, okay. And I was met with this beautiful kind of, instead of we're going to stone you at the school gates because you're like a crazy ass witch that likes to play with tarot cards. It was met with the opposite. And I think that's so gorgeous. That's what I really want to get across with the podcast, with bringing people like yourself on, and encourage women to work with people like yourself, because we're all around. We just need to be able to feel confident enough to, say, hey, I'm here too. I do that.
Yeah, I love that. I get it. I love that. Feels so healing, that story of like how you were met by, it's essentially, like he was like, you were then drawing in all the people who were like, oh, me too. Like, I'm a secret witch. It's like, there's so much healing in that. I think what's also helpful to present is that there also will be people who do shame us, people who do think we're weird, people who do think, we're lunatics and that we should be burned at the stake. And so it's also about learning to love ourselves in that, and to the point where it's like, it's the point where it's like, well, okay, people are going to judge me, and am I judging myself? Like, can I love myself in the shame of that?
I think that's so important. And again, that's another thing, that the masculine aspect of that, like my husband, when we first got together and I was going off to see my psychics and things, he was like, are you going off to do some, some witchy business, or are you off to do, go hang out with your cult? And it's like, yes, so they're all negative connotations of what I do, but it's kind of sort of, over the years, there's the acceptance of, well, she's just going to hang out with her mates. Like, what she does is what she does. I think there's this almost like this lovely reframe in the fact that we are all in little mini covens. We just perhaps never noticed it. Like, I have a group of mum friends that I regularly hang out with, and, they're a coven of sorts, and there's circles all around us. We just are unconscious to it. And I think that's what's so lovely. And we were trying to chart back our journey and how we connected. And it was like, yes, we were in a room, we were writing, but I think it was before that. And again, like attracts like, we met on social media. And I think that's the other thing. It's like, when you start to, the energetics of that isn't just limited to being in person. It's often, it's out in the digital space as well. So anyway, I'm waffling now. I'm going off on a tangent.
I love tangents.
But it's I mean, is there anything else you'd love to share with the listeners? How people can find you? Any kind of insights into what people can do if they're feeling that shame?
Yeah, the other thing that just occurred to me, going back to, our wounds being where our gifts are, is that shame, in my experience, is also kind of the gatekeeper to our liberation. It's like where we find healing. So we can often avoid it. And if we really want to kind of liberate ourselves, the work is like to reclaim the gifts in the wounds. And that was very much something that I resisted, like as well, for a long time. I was like, oh, I'm just going to float around being all light, love and light. And it comes back to what you said, you know, this process of like healing shame often requires us to be in that death and rebirth piece. So we want to go gently with ourselves as well. Is the other thing. Like, without the deepest work for me is like learning to love ourselves back from shame, because that feels what's so healing. But yeah, that's the last point I wanted to share. But yeah, where people can find me. So I am all over the place, but we've got our Secret Witch Show podcast, so people can listen to that if they're podcast fans. So there's that. Where else? We've got my website's nicolebarton.co.uk, so there's a lot of my work on there, and that talks about the archetypal apothecary and all that. And we're just birthing, so by the time this episode is live, I'm hoping that this will be live, is our Secret Witches Apothecary membership. So that's where people can come and kind of learn how to heal themselves, and there's kind of circles and things in there for people to share parts of themselves in a safe place, and yeah, just all the healing. So yeah, that's the main places at the moment.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm just loving you sharing your medicine and your stories.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And if anyone wants to get hold of Nicole, I'll put all of the information in the notes, and we'd love your feedback as well. Always open to feedback. And yeah, so thank you again for joining me, Nicole. And thank you for listening, listeners. We will be back next week with another episode of the Shameless Stories podcast.